You know, I give a cat tour. Did you know this about me? Did you do any research on me before coming on?
No, because I don't need to know about you in order to be effective at the job of being a
True.
board of education director. Unless I do,
No.
and then please correct me. I'll put you on right on my bedstand. And
No, I'm not relevant.
We're rolling. We're rolling.
This is a real thing. Real thing.
None of you have the balls to stop this. Stop this.
I've got plenty of time. I have nothing else going on today.
We're in the Wedge neighborhood right now.
Why would you do this to yourself?
there it is. No.
I apologize. I did not introduce the show at all. I didn't say what this show is or who you are, who I am. This is a Wedge Life podcast, and this is Sonya Emerick, who is running for Minneapolis School Board At-Large, which means everyone in the city can vote in this race. And I'll try and edit this into the beginning of the show and see if it comes out smoothly. It probably won't. But back to this being a terrible job, and welcome to the show. I'm sorry for screwing this up. I haven't done an episode in a while. All right. So how's the campaign going?
It is not like anything I have ever done before in my life. That's usually the most authentic answer I have to give. Yeah,
that rings true. It's running for office, especially an office like this. People are going to yell. If you win, that's when it gets real bad.
Thanks. Thank you for that.
So I was Googling up your name in preparation for this, and like the first page of results, it's you on some guy's YouTube show. And like I'm scrolling through it, see if there's anything interesting in it at all. It's like a 56-minute conversation in like this kind of surprisingly fancy studio. I don't know if it's like local public access TV. And what I scroll to is like a conversation about the movie. I think the subject was like trans kids and sports. And like he brings up the movie Juwanna Mann.
It as best as we can.
Yeah.
I think it probably come from movies and stuff. You know, you got Juwanna Mann. You know, where
I have not seen it, I will say.
That was a professional basketball player who got kicked out of the NBA for whatever he got kicked out for. But so his only way of getting back to basketball, the game he loved, was to go to the WNBA. You know, and he was just like killing them. You know, like he had to hold back. So I'm just saying stuff like when you watch movies like that, you know, he like, dang, do they have an advantage, you know, depending on which way they want to go with it.
I stopped watching. I don't know if it was like a sincere question. I'm sorry to start off my podcast with that story, but I thought that was very strange. Do you want to give us your position on trans kids and athletics?
Well, yeah, I can say that was Malik El-Amin for Trap Right TV, and I think he had, my guess is he invited all the candidates. I'm not sure if all of them did it, but I know I was not the only one. And I think he asked that topic question to everybody who is a school board candidate, so it wasn't something that was kind of specifically for or about me or our conversation. But I do always like the opportunity to talk about, you know, my position on protection for queer and trans and gender expansive youth, because I am queer and transgender, so it's a particular topic of interest. So I think it kind of veered into talking about sports, and I will, you know, I can just say, like, as far as my position, I think that trans kids deserve to participate in sports, and I think that they deserve to play on teams that, you know, align with their genders, that they actually are, their gender identities, who they say themselves to be. But also, you know, I think that, like, it gets really interesting, right, when we think about, what about non-binary people? Like, in the future, are we going to be dividing teams based on gender at all? Like, is that the rubric that makes the most sense? Because if you have non-binary folks, what what team would it make sense for them to play on, or what league, or you know what I mean. But I will say I know that the 74 million just had a great article come out today on trans youth in sports, and I haven't had the opportunity to read it yet, but I would point anybody there if they want more information about that, because that's going to have a lot more expertise on the topic than I would be able to give.
Yeah, I thought your answer that there's lots of variation in people's abilities generally, regardless of gender, and so like there are natural variations between people who compete in men's sports, natural variations in height and athletic ability. This was your answer that I'm regurgitating now, but I thought that was a good answer that you gave. Okay, we can move on from that one. So back to this being a terrible, terrible time to run for office, and this being just an awful, awful job that you're running for, and how bad of a time that you'll have, and what a pain in your life this will be if you win. Why are you doing this? What happened to you? What is your origin story? Why would you do this to yourself?
You know, I had a campaign video, like our video, like our big professional video dropped yesterday, and I was sharing it in a group of folks across the country who I'm still in touch with, where we were teen or very young parents together. So I became a parent at age 21, and I was a single parent. And what I said when I wanted to share this video with these folks that I've known for 20 years in this context, right, is like, I know that every one of us knows how we want to be the grown-ups that we needed when we were kids. And like the opportunity to potentially get to do that for 30,000 children is a dream, right? So, I mean, not to gloss over the very real difficulties that come with both this campaign and this position, but I will say that, you know, my motivation is really nothing other than, you know, I know what it's like to be a kid who didn't get what I needed. And I have been trying to interrupt that for other kids in lots of different ways ever since I was like 19 years old and not technically a kid anymore, and went into homeless youth services at that age. So, you know, I've really been doing this the whole time.
Okay. Let's look ahead to some of the key issues facing the school board and the reasons people might be yelling at you next year if you happen to win. Like, what are like 2 or 3 big questions facing Minneapolis Public Schools over the next term that you'll have responsibility for answering if you win?
Yeah, well, I think you know, some of the indisputable biggies are superintendent search is going to be kind of the first thing that we have right off the bat that we have to just start working on day one, or we being whomever's elected, might not be me, right? And then, you know, the financial crisis, I think, is a crisis. So I think that's pretty immediate. And then, you know, I think that the relationship repair, which to me sort of pairs with engagement, stakeholder engagement, those two are real close together. And then I think academic achievement is top of mind for a lot of folks right now, especially when we see, you know, some of the disparities in terms of our BIPOC kids, our English language learners, and our kids who receive special education services sort of disaggregated out. Issues that are of particular importance to me that might not be quite as top of mind for other folks are decreasing use of segregation for students receiving disability or special education, disabled students receiving special education, and interrupting the school to prison pipeline, which I think there's a big piece of that in decreasing use of exclusionary discipline. So that there's a menu, so there's the buffet. What do you want to talk about?
The superintendent, what are we looking for? What do we want from the next one we didn't have from the last one? Should we compare and contrast?
Well, that's a place to start. Certainly something that I would like to see in a superintendent that I don't think we saw in the last one was not just ability, but like interest in partnerships, right? I know that some past superintendents have had a partnership with like Hennepin County commissioners. So it's like the school board and the county board are better partnered, right? Or the school board and the city council. Now we see out of Hennepin County that there's a lot more and new disparity reduction programming that has come out of both kind of the climate of the metropolitan area over the past couple of years, and also getting the influx of funding that came from the federal government with the pandemic. And so I think that now is a really good time to be intergovernmentally partnered. But then I think there's also sort of like the community partnerships. How are we leveraging our relationships with different organizations and individuals in the community to, make sure that we're really utilizing all the resources that exist in Minneapolis so that our kids can have a really well-rounded education, so our kids can have really culturally sustaining education. Hennepin County Library System has some amazing programming, including they will have folks come into your classrooms and teach kids to learn to use a library and help get them a library card, and then help them learn about the library that's in the neighborhood of the school. So right now we're facing the situation where some of our schools don't have libraries or fully staffed libraries or well-stocked libraries. And ideally we would want our libraries to be right in our school because that's going to be the greatest access, right? But like, if that's not the reality right now in terms of our resource situation, like that shouldn't mean that kids don't have access to libraries. It means that we push out into the community and find that resource, So I think partnership, but when it comes to what I'm looking for in a superintendent sort of more generally, I'm really dedicated to our new strategic plan that's been developed over the past several years in MPS. And we're just at the very beginning of implementation, and I think that it has these really solid 5-year metrics. It has really specific areas of improvement. It has as well conditions. It names very concretely the conditions that we would need to see in our district in order to actually make progress on the goals that are laid out. So I think, sometimes when you're in crisis, there's sort of this scramble, right? You like start to try something, but then you're worried it might not work. So you do something different and you change it around and you know what I mean? And I think sometimes what we really need from our leaders, or like, as a parent, this is resonant to me too, like somebody needs to be the one who says, we're going to stay the course, like we're not going to run around, we're not going to scramble around, we're going to stay the course. And certainly there's things in our district that aren't courses that we should stay. But this strategic plan, I think we really need a superintendent who's going to use it to improve conditions and to dismantle racism in our district and related forms of oppression.
So what do we do about declining enrollment? There's a lot of people that have children in Minneapolis, parents not choosing Minneapolis Public Schools for whatever reason. Either they're choosing a private school or a charter school. How do you turn that around? And there's budget implications there in that Minneapolis public schools are funded based on, in part, on how many students they have.
It's important to also say that a lot of students are open enrolling in other public schools in different districts.
Right, yeah.
So, this one is always personal for me because I have been on the edge of pulling my kid out of the district for a minute now, because for last school year and this school year, he's only getting 20% of the services that are in his IEP. And because of the significance of my 7-year-old's disabilities, like this is something that's going to be impacting him 20 years from now, And so why wouldn't I take him out of this district if he could be better served somewhere else, regardless of exactly what that type of school is? Like what, if you're not going to teach my kid, why am I going to leave my kid with you? And so I think, we talk a lot about the infrastructure stuff, right? Like, and I can name a bunch of things that I do think are real efficacious solutions, right? Like I think that having more educators of color, or more educators, sometimes I like to really say it more like educators who have experiences that culturally mirror our students' experience, because I got to have a disabled teacher for my kid over the summer, and he made so much more progress because the cultural understanding was already there, right? And So, and to do that, we need to be able to pay teachers more. We really do need to be paying our teachers more if we're going to be retaining, any of them. So, all these pieces are interconnected, right? In terms of how do we get funding for the district? Are we trying to get it from the state? We're paying our teachers more so we can have better, representation in our teaching force and have our workforce filled, right? Not have all these open positions. But at the same time, there's this piece of me that's like, if you harm my kid, right? Like if you have a practice, like I'm not even talking about direct harm, but like if you have policies and practices that are hurting my kid, like if someone hurts your kid, what are they going to have to do for them to get another shot at your child, at your kid? I mean, I don't know if you have kids, but like you do wrong by my kid and it's going to take something pretty significant to get another shot. And so I think that like some of our families really are feeling very harmed. And there has to be a good faith demonstration of if you gave us this another shot, your children wouldn't come to that same harm again, So I think that a lot of folks will talk about how do we get the families back? How do we get the families back? And I tend to think more about how do we change the conditions within the system that caused the families to want to leave in the first place? Because I would never want to ask for another chance with somebody's child if I didn't have a real good plan about how they were going to have a better experience this time around personally.
So I spoke with another candidate about how bad the financial situation is for Minneapolis Public Schools, like the potential of school closures, which I think St. Paul has done, the potential of like going into receivership with the state, like there are potentially very difficult, unpopular decisions that the board will have to make. Can you talk about your approach to that?
Yeah, I think it's always really hard to think about something like the possibility of having to close schools because the impact on the community where that happens and the folks who've been connected to that school is so great, and the impact is felt for so long. And I think especially right now when everyone in the district, families, students, educators, administrators are just, I think, really reeling from so much disruption over the past few years. I feel like it would be a particularly big lift to sort of restructure and reorganize again. So I would really want to see, is there any way that we can move forward without having to close buildings? And I think that we have to be honest, like, I don't know, I'm going to be the candidate or one of the candidates, if there's more, who's going to say, I would rather close school buildings than keep feeding brilliant students to the school to prison pipeline. If that's the real choice, if that's our real choice in front of us, and we don't have something else, like I've been a parent in poverty for 20 years. I know what it is like to have to make those hard choices. There's no good choices in poverty. Anyone who has lived in poverty can tell you that you can't good choice your way out of poverty, right? You have to make the hard choices, and somebody has to be the mom or the parent at the end of the day who has the kids who are upset and who says, this is what we had to do. And there has to be strong leadership. I think sometimes the leadership can come off as cold or disconnected. And I definitely wouldn't want to come off that way. And I would want to be well connected with community. But like, the reason we elect folks for this job is like somebody has to make these hard decisions and be where the buck stops. And, I don't mind being real about that. So, to recap, I think that we need to look everywhere we can for what possibilities exist that don't include closing schools or reduce the number of schools that we might need to close as much as possible. But I also think that there needs to be better transparency, that's something that has to be on the table, that we have to be thinking about. I think parents are also really sick of folks not talking about it and not preparing for it. So that's a hard one to walk. But the way that we have our students ending up in the juvenile justice system right now out of Minneapolis Public Schools, to me, is at such a crisis that something has to be the first priority,
So I have talked to 3 candidates on the podcast so far. I think I don't know if I'm going to be able to get the 4th. I haven't been able to make contact with the 4th. But it seems like everyone has the same values and everyone is very nice. And I don't know how to differentiate the candidates. So you're a candidate and you've been campaigning. How is a voter supposed to differentiate between candidates who are saying a lot of the same stuff and I think mean what they say and have the same values? Like, to make it specific to you, what are you offering? What are you bringing that the other candidates aren't, or what are they bringing that people should be aware of if you want to go negative? Like, what am I looking for? How are the candidates different?
So first of all, I think that we're really lucky in Minneapolis to have all of our candidates across races, so not just at large, but across our whole ballot, I think have the type of values that generally speaking, I feel good about. When we see some of our neighboring districts have some, really bigoted folks who have some, are trying to infiltrate their school boards with really dangerous ideas, really racist ideas, really homophobic and transphobic ideas. So first of all, I want to say how lucky I feel to be in a field of folks that, that don't have those types of mindsets represented. But also when it comes to what's different about me, I think what I've learned is different about me is that I'm the Every Kid Belongs candidate. That is the first thing that that was sort of the spark from which my entire campaign grew, is what would it be like if we had a school district where we said every kid in Minneapolis could come here and we could teach them. Any kid residing in Minneapolis could choose to come to Minneapolis Public Schools, because, we talk about how many kids we're losing through disenrollment, right? We don't talk about how many kids we're pushing out. And that looks a lot of different ways, but I can tell you on our 11 of mediation in, at Minnesota Department of Education mediation for my kid, I got the first smile out of the team when I said, so what if I just wanted to disenroll him? And they were really happy to help me with that in a way that they were not feeling willing to help keep my kid in the district and serve him here, right? I know in my work with Hennepin County Juvenile Justice, we have kids who are coming out of their justice involvement. They need to re-enroll and they want to go back to their home Minneapolis Public School high schools. And they're told by enrollment at the Davis Center, no, you can't. You're going to, an alternative learning center, or, you're going to a contract alternative program, right? Like these are technically part of Minneapolis Public Schools, but they're contracted out. They don't have our union educators there, right? So why wouldn't we serve those kids in Minneapolis Public Schools? Why are we having some of our disabled kids in federal setting 4 schools in a different district? We could be serving those kids here. Like, why are we deciding that there's a tremendous number of students that we just don't want to teach, right? And so folks will start saying things like they're dangerous, or they're violent, or they're not good kids, or they don't want to come to school to learn, or they're not engaged with learning, or, this isn't the place for them. And I think we're talking about children, you know what I mean? And while it's a concern, of course, that everyone is safe at school, I have a child who has significant disabilities that have components that would be called behavioral. And we don't call them that. We don't, because they're managed. They're well managed. She's a good and very safe kid to be around. But I think part of it is because he has an autistic parent, right? I was diagnosed with autism a little over 10 years ago. And so I understand how he works and how his neurology works and what he needs and how he learns. And so we can meet those needs and have a real safe situation. But Minneapolis Public Schools isn't partnering with autistic adults, which for folks that don't know, 1 in 36 is our autism rates in Minnesota. So we are not talking about a small group of students or a small group of adults. There is great leadership in organizing in the nonprofit sector and at the government level with autistic adults. Public school districts haven't taken advantage of that. Instead, we'll push kids out, right? And so, I think that is what really feels different about me. I don't think our district is better off without any of our kids. I think that we talk about losing our kids, and we talk about it in a money way. We talk about, we lost this per pupil dollars when the kid went to a different district or a private or charter or whatever. It's like we forget that we're actually talking about unique individual kids, and every one of them brings something irreplaceable to our district. When we lose that kid, we lose that part of our community. We don't get to switch out another kid for that, right? These are people, and we're better with all of our kids. And so I think that, I think that if there is difficulty teaching a kid in Minneapolis Public School, including a kid in general education in Minneapolis Public School, having a place for a kid in our district, the problem is not the kid. The problem is that our system isn't set up to give a free, appropriate public education to every student, which is our ethical duty and our legal duty. So, yeah.
Do you watch a lot of school board meetings? I watch a lot of city council meetings. I don't watch so many school board meetings, but I'm just wondering, are you the kind of person who will either stream a meeting online? Do you watch them all the way through? Tell me about that.
I watch most school board meetings all the way through. I can't say I'm at 100%,
okay,
but definitely at, I would say, 80 to 90% of the content.
Okay, so
and I do stream them from home. Sometimes I have to watch them in playback.
right.
But yeah.
Okay, I don't know what my point was about with that, but I was just curious if that was the kind of person you are.
I wish they would stream the the finance meetings and stuff like that, because open meeting law does say that they have to be open to the public, and I'd really like to be able to. I think it's an access issue. So
yeah, I do too. I'm kind of irritated that the city council and the city of Minneapolis has stopped streaming a lot of stuff that had been previously streamed because of the pandemic. They've stopped doing that, but maybe we'll get back to doing more of it next year after the budget. This one may not be related to schools. It could be whatever you want to do with it, but it's about leadership. Think back to a time in your life when there was an issue that moved you and caused you to feel great, passionate feelings about it and made you take an action, like a time in your life that you showed leadership on something that you're particularly proud of. Like, what was the issue? What did you do? How did it turn out?
I mean, I have some stories like that, but when I really feel for that, that resonance, what really comes up for me is times when I have taken leadership from folks, right? I have been doing anti-racist organizing. I'm a white person. I want to say that for folks who, I don't know if this might just be audio, so I'm a white person, but I've been doing anti-racist organizing in Minneapolis for 25 years or so, and some of the really resonant actions and projects and organizing have been when I have been successful at being effective to help another person or another community achieve something that they've identified as important for them. So I think that it can be a big challenge when you're in a privileged and majority group to figure out how to really be well partnered with a group that's experiencing oppression, right? And I've experienced allyship, folks' allyship to me, right? And it's just always it's a skill, and it's a skill that has to be iterated and built continuously over lifetime of how do you show up for people? How do you maybe deprioritize your own thing and make sure that you're addressing concerns that don't usually get to the mic? What does it look like to listen to multiple perspectives and try to synthesize them into, a durable solution that addresses all concerns? What does it look like to, to step back and make space? So I think, I can tell you, like I said, I've been a single parent for 20 years. I have I have made some out of nothing so many times, and I could tell you all my glory stories. But that's not what really makes me feel proud. What makes me feel really proud of my ability is when I've been able to collaborate effectively with other folks, and take leadership and take guidance. And I think I want to say that because the school board's a voting body of 9. You know what I mean? So, I know that I can be a leader, and I know that I bring really unique things to the table. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how great my ideas are if I can't take the perspectives of the folks that I'm working with. And that is authentically what I have the most pride in.
Okay. Here's a quick question. What would you be doing right now if you weren't here with me? What am I taking you away from?
I would be reading that 74 million article on transgender youth in sports.
Okay.
I'd be doing research. That really is. I also there's a guide, a policy guide out of Hennepin County on their contracted alternative programs that I have on my bedside table to read right now. It's just kind of like which policy or which document or which article or research. I want to know everything. Are you
busy trying to reach all 100 and whatever? How many voters do we have in Minneapolis? Can you tell me that?
Okay. I think what I can tell you is that when we did our analysis, and I'm not DFL endorsed, right? I didn't go for the DFL endorsement. So all of our analysis is ours, like my team's. It's not, like DFL precinct analysis or something like that. I don't know how it works. I've never worked on a DFL campaign. But we thought that we projected around 200,000 voters. But, we really kind of had to say 150 to 250,000. That's not registered voters. That's how many we think are going to go to the polls and vote in this race, in this down ballot race, right? So that's ballpark information for you.
Sounds right. I'm an election judge, by the way. So.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much for your service.
Thank you for running for office. I think we're both contributing mightily to the democratic process by what we do. Okay, real last question. This is not political at all. This is what give us some recommendations, and it's a very wide open question. I want 3 recommendations. It could be a book or a movie, an experience, a specific park. It could be an animal, a person. Give us 3 recommendations for experiences that will take people's minds off the bad things and make them happy. Do you have 3 things you can give us like that?
Take their minds off the bad things and make them happy. Well, that just kind of blew all of them out of the water. I'm really serious, actually. I'm a really serious person. Look, this is what I'm going to say. There is a documentary called Forget Me Not. It just became available to purchase for stream. I'm not affiliated with it in any way. It just became available to purchase for stream on Vimeo yesterday. I first saw it in the Human Rights Film Festival last year, and I watched it 3 times in 48 hours. It's a story of a family in New York who is trying to get their child with Down syndrome into general education school in the New York public school system. And it was the first time that I saw a story that was like ours here, trying to get my kid into general education in Minneapolis Public Schools. So if folks are interested in school segregation of students who have intellectual and developmental disabilities, go get it and watch it. It's so important. I love the 10 principles of the disability justice movement, which folks can find through the organization Sins Invalid, sinsinvalid.org. To me, those are probably my guiding stars. That's what I shape how we campaign around. The disability justice movement informs all of my work. It's incredibly intersectional. So that brings me joy. As far as other folks, I don't know. I have 5 cats. I've had the same 5 cats for 10 years. They're a colony. We live with them. Their names are Fiasco, Casey, Bebop, Rocksteady, and Radical Edward. And, if you're not allergic and you're not averse and you don't mind sharp-footed things, get a cat, hold a cat, pet a cat. Or 5.
Yeah.
That's what makes me, yeah.
You know, I give a cat tour. Did you know this about me? Did you do any research on me before coming on?
No, because I don't need to know about you in order to be effective at the job of being a board of education director. Unless I do,
No.
and then please correct. I'll put you on my bedstand. And
No, I'm not relevant to anything that you'll need to do in your.
sorry, I didn't mean to be so mean.
No, it's true.
You're relevant.
But I have a cat tour that I do, so I was wondering if that was like micro targeted at my audience. That you know, this is like a cat loving audience.
It wasn't, but wow, I did it, huh?
Yeah, you succeeded. So, sometimes the best successes you have in life have nothing to do with preparation.
My cats are great.
Okay, well, that's all I have, Sonya Emerick.
Well, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. Vote on or before November 8th, everybody. I don't know if you do an outro with that, but there it is.
Thank you.
And I appreciate the invitation.
Thank you for coming on. This has been the Wedge Live Podcast. I'm your host, John Edwards. My guest has been Sonya Emerick, who is running for Minneapolis School Board at Large. And like Sonya said, please vote. You can vote now or you can vote on Election Day, but please vote. Okay, that's the end of the show.
This is a real thing. Real thing.
None of you have the balls to stop this. Stop this.
I've got plenty of time. I have nothing else going on today.
We're in the Wedge neighborhood right now.